Hey, welcome back. So, you guys, I've been thinking about this feeling I've had lately where I'm actually doing a lot. You know, I'm moving, I'm getting things done. I'm cleaning my house, I'm showing up to things, I'm cooking beautiful meals, I'm recording podcasts, I'm walking the dogs, I'm trying to take care of myself. And yet, somehow in my head, for some reason, I still feel like I'm behind. Not behind on anything specific, just behind like at doing life. Like sometimes I feel as though everyone else got a memo about how to live and I just didn't get the memo. I just plumb missed it. And so I'm starting to realize the problem isn't that I'm not doing enough. It might just be that my brain is too loud. Does that ever happen to you? So today, that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the mental noise of modern life. You know, like when you feel behind, even when in your heart's heart, you know you're doing the very best you can. We're going to have a little chat about that. So I'm glad you're here to join me today. And I really want to start off with the feeling of never being caught up. So at, I don't know, I would say close to the holidays, somewhere between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I just decided that I needed to go back to my list. I've always been a list girl and I really kind of love, writing lists and making sure it gives me a sense of satisfaction to check something off of a list. And so I realized I hadn't been doing that consistently. And I was kind of going back to writing a list more to prove to myself that I was more productive than I was giving myself credit for. I just kind of wasn't keeping track anymore. So that was the reason for the lists. And then the lists led me to realize that I didn't have any system in place for like executing on this list, right? So I went out and I got a planner. I thought I'm going to go back to old school planners because even though I kind of religiously use my calendar on my phone, I like a visual. I like something I can erase or cross out or check off or highlight. And so then I was doing a daily list and I had my written planner and I had my app on my phone where I was using my phone calendar. And before you know it, I realized I was spending more of my day with lists and planners. And I kept having this feeling of, on paper, everything looks good, but I know in my mind I should be further along than where I am. And I started to get this feeling where day after day, I don't think I ever finished a day where I was feeling like I had accomplished anything. And so I started to think of things a little bit differently. And I started to realize that I'm probably never, ever gonna finish a day anymore feeling complete. So now instead of trying to cram everything into the day, I just stop. And now sometimes by doing that, I realize, well, yeah, I'm being more forgiving with myself, but even rest feels unearned some days because I feel like, well, I don't really deserve to be sitting here enjoying this show because I didn't get, the 3 things at the end of my list done. And I always feel like there's one more thing I could have done, improved, optimized upon. Even on days where I literally do everything on my list, I still go to bed mentally rearranging tomorrow, instead of just letting today count and being quiet in the moment. Now, this is just me and I don't know, but somehow, some way, I think that I'm not alone in this. I think that we have a tendency to be really hard on ourselves. And I just thought I would share it with you because it just got me to thinking. And so I want to talk about, along the same lines, that self-criticism that we have that's disguised as productivity. Aren't we just so hard on ourselves? We pretend that it's for the sake of growth or success or progress, but really we're just mistaking pressure for motivation. Some days you wake up and you just feel like, oh, I'm in go, go, go mode. Today's going to be a great day. And it happened to me last week. I just woke up gung ho, ready to get everything done. And then I realized, wait a minute, is this motivation or do I feel pressured to get all of this done? And then there's other days where I think I'm just addicted to that feeling of trying, because trying in and of itself feels like I'm being productive. I may not get shit done, but I'm trying to get stuff done. So at least I'm trying, at least I'm thinking I'm being productive. We're just fooling ourselves in those moments. And then my favorite lately is comparing my current self to what my younger self was able to get accomplished in a day. And there are reasons that there are stages in life. When I think of how much energy I expended when all 4 of my boys were at home and I had a full-time job and a business, and I came home and still ran my family somehow, some way. Now I spend an afternoon and evening with my grandchildren and I'm exhausted. So there's a reason that we go through certain phases of life and why we're not able to accomplish that same level of energy at other phases of life. And that should be okay, but yet we're constantly forcing ourselves to improve, to be better. And honestly, being done to me anymore is not a feeling I feel very often. And I'm starting to be more and more okay with it, because I don't know when being driven turned into a bad thing. When being driven was the equivalent of being constantly, quietly exhausted. And I don't like that. So I'm just not doing that anymore. Now I'm trying to contain the noise. I'm not eliminating it. I'm containing it. We don't need to silence our mind, right? We need to listen to our thoughts. Otherwise they just ruminate and they go around and around in circles. We just need to give our thoughts containers, because if you really truly think about this, if you allow your mind to wander endlessly without boundaries, it's going to turn on you. It's going to come to one thought or another that makes you feel a sense of inadequacy in one way, shape, or form, because our mind is this container of boundless thoughts. And so unless we give it boundaries and put those thoughts into containers and contain them, then the thoughts are always going to win. So the idea really is exactly the opposite of what we think it is. It's fewerless, right? It's being gentler with our daily structure, still having structure and intention, but being gentler with it. And then always ending the day intentionally. I heard recently on a podcast that even as adults, it's really important for us to program ourselves to have a bedtime. Now, that doesn't mean that, if you're having the time of your life and 10 o'clock comes, you need to stop the presses, throw everyone out and go to bed. But train ourselves to have a time that we know our day ends, and to have a routine surrounding that bedtime, whether it be turn down the lights or turn off all of the, screens, or have some breathing exercises, or spend some time in prayer. Or I like to have a tiny square of dark chocolate with salt before I go to bed. I eat it slowly, intentionally. I drink some water, and then I start my bedtime routine. And that triggers my body into knowing that I'm changing phases for the day. And I'm not trying to necessarily become a calmer person, but I'm just trying to stop bullying myself with my own thoughts. I'm trying to be very cognizant of how kind I am to myself, because we can be kind to others, but when it comes to our own self-talk, sometimes we're just not very kind. And so I'm trying to be really aware of that these days. So I'm going to pivot and move on to our fun segment, which is This Week on the Verge. And first, we're going to talk about my winery experience last week. So, Winos on the Verge last week took place at none other than Europa Winery. Last weekend, I took my son, his wife, my grandson, and my soon-to-be grandson out to dinner at Bolero, and we stopped first at the tasting room. And oh my gosh, you guys, it was Saturday. I now know why I never go there on a Saturday. I went to, go for the dinner, but we went a little early because we are members, and so I wanted to enjoy my glass of wine. Well, we got there late enough that the VIP tasting room was closed. So we had to go in the general tasting room, and it was kind of crazy. There was so much action going on. The tasting bar was probably 3 people deep all the way across, and it's quite large. And there were just people in all of the breezeways standing, whether it be waiting, enjoying wine or waiting for a table at the restaurant, or I don't know what the heck, but there wasn't even any music when we first got there. So by the time we got our glass and relocated, we were able to get in a little bit earlier than our reservation. And so my son ordered a glass of Traitorsand, and my husband had a glass of Ola Morata. And off to dinner we went, where we were treated as VIPs. It was just a beautiful experience. I wanted my son and his wife to have one last fabulous meal before the baby is born, and they're not able to get out for a while. And I thought this would be a really cool opportunity for them to do that. So into the restaurant we go, glasses of wine in hand, and the first thing that happened was Joseph, the sommelier, was sent over to our table to give us a wine recommendation. And I could not believe this bottle of wine. I think I got it right. Joseph, correct me if I'm wrong, but this was a 2022 Ribeiro del Vaquero. It was a Tempranillo blend. Price point was $74. But what struck me about it was that it was a blend of all the oldest vines that were combined into this blend. And its sister wine, the Tempranillo itself, sold for $2,200 per bottle. So this was a very fine wine with a amazing price point. And I really loved that it was fruity without the sweet, and it was going to go wonderful with our dinner. And so I want to talk real briefly about what we had for dinner. We decided that we were going to have the Tour de Europa with the chorizo and seafood paella. And if you don't know what that is, it is a service for 4. It's kind of their showstopper piece. I'll post a picture on my Instagram so you can see it. But it is a tomahawk steak that comes hanging over a beautiful dish of paella. If you're going to order it as soon as you get there, because it does take about 45 minutes to be done. And then there's a tableside presentation. It's served along with a couple of sauces. I loved the red wine reduction sauce. I also really love the chimichurri, and they had this red pepper sauce that was to go with the paella that was also delicious. I mean, fire. Really, really, really good. Our meat was cooked perfectly. It came out with a beautiful presentation, slathered in butter. I mean, It was just gorgeous. This thing will set you back about $280, but for 4 people, it's well worth it. There was plenty of food to go around. And while we were waiting, we ordered the Caesar salad. On the menu, it's called an organized Caesar salad. And if you've never had it, I suggest you order it because it's a really cool presentation. It almost looks like little sushi rolls. And I may or may not have talked about it on the podcast before because it's one of my standard go-tos. And so being with a pregnant mom, we weren't sure if we can order the Caesar salad, but we were happy to find that it wasn't made in the traditional raw egg way. So my daughter-in-law was able to enjoy it. And we, however, like ordering the disorganized Caesar salad. And then we order the jicama sliced on top because it's just easier to serve and it seems like there's more to go around. We also ordered from the tapas menu, the campeones, which are a variety of beautiful mushrooms that are super lightly battered. Not all of them even seem to be battered, and they're served with this delicious sauce. And when I tell you, it was just a perfectly well-rounded meal. We no sooner got done with our salad and our campeones, and, on came the show. And my grandson was just so fascinated by the, show-stopping presentation, not to mention the fact that he's becoming quite the foodie because he really did enjoy the sauces and the meat. And I was pretty proud of him for, being adventurous enough to try this stuff. He even had some of the shrimp. The paella, maybe because of the saffron, was just a little bit too much for him, but he'll grow into it, I'm quite certain. And so that was my weekend in winery and food. If you want a lovely experience, I suggest you head over to Bolero and you order the Tour de Europa and enjoy it with a nice bottle of wine. Joseph the sommelier will take amazing care of you, and Matthew the server, not too bad if you ask me. So, moving on to Bravo and pop culture. Well, lately, I don't know about you, but I've been watching Traitors, and I want to talk a little bit about how much time we all spend living in our heads instead of actually living our lives, and how the 2 shows that I'm watching right now are perfect metaphors for that. So first, I want to talk about the Traitors. Think about it. Everyone is constantly reading each other, replaying conversations, constantly thinking, reading tone, facial expressions, being silent, second-guessing each other's instincts, creating stories in their own mind about other people. This is the kind of stuff that happens when your mind is louder than your life. You stop being present, and instead of living your actual life, you start being a full-time narrator of your own life, right? And let's think about this. How many times do you sit and overthink your relationships or reread a text and try to understand if its inference was exactly how you took it the first time? Or how you think about something and you're scanning for problems? Or how you're in a moment, but even in the very midst of that moment, you're never fully relaxing. And as I was watching Traitors, I just thought, this is what it's like when you're not just truly living your life. You're kind of narrating and second guessing everything that's around you. And so 90 Day Fiancé, the other way, also kind of reminded me how mental noise can be emotional storytelling too, right? So let's talk about what's happening on the other way. And there are so many storylines that we could break out and talk about individually. But for purposes of this exercise, I just want to talk about how these people are building entire futures in their heads without even having met these people in some cases. They go across the world to change their life completely and totally ignoring what their body is telling them. There are red flags waving and they're just refusing to see them. These people tend to fall in love with the narrative instead of the reality, right? They talk themselves into things that don't feel right at all, just because this is what they want to believe. And this is mental noise in an emotional form. When the story in your head becomes more powerful than what's actually happening in your real life. So let's talk about that. Let's look at that in our real life mirror. What about when you're staying too long in a situation that you know is uncomfortable? What about when you force decisions that you know you really shouldn't be making? Or those cases where you see something and you romanticize its potential, whether it be a relationship or a business endeavor. Or we all do this too. When we choose fantasy over clarity, we want to believe that our fantasy version of something is really the truth, when in reality, we can see the clarity. We can see how clearly it is not true. And these shows are entertaining, but they're also just exaggerated versions of what we all do, living in our heads, negotiating with reality, and trying to think our way into peace. So this episode, to me, is really about learning how to turn the volume down in our own minds so we could actually hear our own lives again. Now, before we go, I want to tell you a little bit about everything that is going on with regards to my travel. I am so excited that I am starting to make plans for an upcoming trip to my favorite place, Loreto. It is one of my happy places. Of course, I'll tell you all about it here on the podcast. But for this year, we've also decided that we are likely going to put off a big international trip and instead plan something where we get to see our own country instead. And I am just super excited about the notion of traveling with a good friend, showing her my happy place, and also about the idea of just doing nothing. That for me seems like an amazing vacation. And so as the plans start to come together, I will share them with you. But I just wanted to let you know that the travel vein of living on the verge is alive and well. And with that, I just wanted you to know that I think the biggest thing I'm learning right now is that a good life doesn't feel loud. I don't have this desire to jump on here and tell you everything I'm doing and who I met and what I acquired. It feels quiet in a very specific way, my life these days. It's not empty. It's not sad. It's not lacking. It's just not constantly yelling at me anymore. And if you're like me, maybe the work isn't doing more. Maybe it's just learning how to end the day without attacking yourself. Learning how to end the day in a quiet, kind, and self-loving way. And that's what I've been working on lately. And so I hope you got something out of this episode. I do appreciate you spending this time with me. I'll be back really soon. Until next time, I'll be here, living on the verge. Have a good one.